somewhere within a few streets of your house, there's a clematis eating a fence alive. Great ropes of it, dripping with purple, climbing over a mailbox and halfway up a downspout, and the person who owns it could not tell you a single thing about how it got there. They don't feed it. They don't baby it. They went on vacation for 3 weeks in the hottest part of July, and it didn't even flinch. It just kept blooming. And meanwhile, there's you. You bought one. A beautiful one. You dug the hole, you read the little tag, you watered it like a newborn, and it gave you one shy handful of flowers, and then slowly, quietly, without any drama at all, it just left. No death scene. It was there, and then one morning it wasn't. Here's what nobody at the garden center will tell you as they're ringing you up. Clematis is not a delicate plant. It only acts delicate when it's being grown wrong. And almost everyone grows it wrong, because the advice printed on that plastic tag is either useless or flat out backwards. You were told to plant it level with the pot. Wrong. You were told to give it sun, and it'll be happy. Half right, and the missing half is what killed it. You were told to prune it in spring. That one snipped off every flower you were waiting for. None of that was your fault. Out in the wild, this plant scrambles up through hedgerows and scrubby thickets, throwing its flowers up into the open sun while its roots stay tucked down in the cool, damp shade of everything growing around it. It's built to survive. It's built to take a beating and come back bigger. And once you understand what it actually wants, really wants, not what the tag says, it turns into that monster vine on your neighbor's fence. The one people stop and photograph. The one you can neglect for a month, and it forgives you. So over the next 20 minutes, I'm going to give you 9 things that turn a fussy little diva into a tank. And pay close attention when we get to secret number 6, because that one explains why most clematis quietly die in their first 2 years, and I promise you, almost nobody talks about it. Stick with me. But before the fixes, let's read the patient, because a struggling clematis is actually shouting at you if you know the signals. If the leaves down at the bottom are going yellow while the top still looks okay, that's usually a water and root story. Either the roots are baking and dry, or they're sitting in soggy soil and drowning. Clematis wants moist, not swampy, and it'll yellow from the bottom when that balance is off. If the leaf edges are going brown and crispy, that's heat and drought hitting the roots. The base of your plant is cooking in the sun, and it's pulling the plug on its own lower leaves to save itself. If all the leaves and flowers are crowded up at the very top and the bottom 2 or 3 feet of the vine are bare, naked stems, that's not a disease. That's a training problem, and we'll fix it, because a bare-bottomed clematis is one of the most common and most preventable disappointments there is. If you're getting plenty of green but hardly any flowers, or fat buds that swell up and then just never open, that's a feeding problem, and probably the wrong food at the wrong time. And then there's the big one. The whole vine, or one thick stem, standing tall and healthy one evening and lying collapsed and blackened the next morning. That one looks like death. It usually isn't. Hold that thought, because it's secret 6. All right, 9 secrets, let's go. Secret number 1 breaks a rule you've followed your whole gardening life. With almost everything you plant, the golden law is set it in the ground at the exact same depth it sat in the pot. Bury a tomato stem too deep and you fuss about rot. Bury most perennials too deep and you smother the crown and they sulk. So your instinct every time is to keep that soil line matched up. With clematis, throw that instinct out. You want to plant this thing deeper than feels right, deep enough that it makes you a little nervous. Take it out of the nursery pot and set it so the crown and that first set of leaf joints on the stem end up 2 to 3 inches below the surface. You're deliberately burying part of the plant. Why on earth would you do that? Because those buried joints can wake up and push out brand new shoots from underground. You're building a backup plant beneath the soil. So the day a late frost fries the top, or a slug army mows it down, or you clip it in half with the string trimmer, and one of those things will happen, the plant doesn't die. It just resents fresh growth from below. In a container, do the same thing. Use a deep, wide pot and bury that crown a couple inches down. It's the single most important move you'll make, and the whole rest of this video leans on it. Remember that. Secret number 2 is that old line you've heard 100 times and probably ignored. Clematis likes its face in the sun and its feet in the shade. People repeat it like a nursery rhyme and then do nothing about it. Big mistake, because this is the difference between a plant that limps and a plant that lounges. The top of the vine, leaves, flowers, all of it wants real sun. 6 hours a day, minimum. That's where the blooms come from. No argument. But the roots are the opposite animal. They hate being hot. When the sun bakes bare soil at the base of the plant, the roots stress out, the moisture evaporates, and the vine starts dropping its own lower leaves just to hang on. That's your leggy, sad-looking clematis in a hot exposed spot, even though it's getting all the light in the world. The fix is to keep that root zone cool and covered. You can lay down stones or a shade tile, sure. But the trick that actually works best is to plant something low and leafy right in front of it, a small shrub, a clump of hardy geraniums, a few perennials. So you've got a living blanket casting shade over the roots and holding moisture in the ground. Lay 2 or 3 inches of mulch on top of that. But keep the mulch pulled back a couple inches from the actual stem, or you'll trap wet against the crown and invite rot. In a hot southern zone, this shading isn't optional. It's survival. In a cold northern zone, that same mulch layer doubles as a winter blanket over the crown. Cool feet, sunny face. Burn it in. Secret number 3 is about water, and it's where good intentions do the most damage. Most people who lose a clematis loved it to death with the wrong kind of watering, a light little sprinkle every day that wets the top inch of soil and evaporates by noon. That trains the roots to stay shallow, right up in the hot zone, exactly where you don't want them. Clematis is a thirsty plant with deep roots, and in its first 2 or 3 years while it's establishing, it drinks hard. What it wants is a deep soak, a couple of gallons poured slowly at the base once or twice a week, so the water sinks down and the roots chase it down with it. Deep and in frequent beats, shallow and daily every time. Now, containers are their own case. A pot dries out fast, especially in summer, so a container clematis might need checking every single day in a heat wave. Stick a finger 2 knuckles down, and if it's dry, soak it until water runs out the bottom. But whether it's in a pot or the ground, don't confuse thirsty with drowning. The soil should stay evenly moist, never sitting in a puddle. Well drained but never bone dry, that's the target. And a good mulch layer buys you the wiggle room to forget it for a few days without a disaster. Secret number 4 is the one people never think about until their vine is an ugly mess. And it's this. Clematis can only climb something thin. Here's what nobody explains. It doesn't have suckers. It doesn't have twining stems like a bean. It climbs by curling its leaf stalks, the little stems that hold each leaf around whatever they can reach. And those leaf stalks can only wrap around something pencil thin or thinner. So when you plant a clematis at the base of a fat pergola post or a chunky arbor beam and expect it to shimmy up on its own, it can't. It flails, it flops, and it gives up. You have to give it something skinny to grab. Netting, garden twine, thin wire, a lattice with narrow slats, a slim obelisk in a pot. And here's the part that saves you from that bare-bottomed look. Train it early and train it wide. When the young shoots come up, don't let them all race straight for the top in a single bundle. Gently fan them out and tie them in low, spreading them sideways across your support so growth breaks out all along the base instead of just at the tip. 5 minutes of tying in during the first season is the difference between a vine that's clothed in flowers from top to bottom and one that's naked for 3 feet, with a mop of leaves way up high. Do this, and it looks intentional. Skip it, and it looks like a bird's nest on a stick. Which brings us to the secret that terrifies more people than any other. Secret number 5. Know your pruning group, or put the shears down completely. Pruning clematis has a reputation for being impossible, and the reason is simple. There isn't one rule, there are 3, and which one you follow depends entirely on which type you own. Cut at the wrong moment, and you won't kill the plant, but you'll snip off every flower bud before it opens, and get a whole season of nothing but leaves, and you'll swear the thing is broken when really you broke it. Here's the plain English version. Clematis fall into 3 groups. Group 1 blooms early, in spring. On wood, it grew the previous year, the vigorous Montana types and the early alpines. You barely touch these. Prune them hard in late winter and you're cutting off this year's show. Just tidy them lightly right after they finish flowering, and otherwise leave them be. Group 2 is the big, flashy, large-flowered hybrids that bloom in late spring and early summer, and they flower on last year's wood and again on this year's. Give these a light going over in early spring, take out anything dead or weak, shorten back to a strong pair of buds, and they'll reward you with 2 flushes. Group 3 blooms late, in summer and into fall. On brand new growth, the Viticellas, the Jackmanias, the sweet autumn types. These are the easiest plants on this entire list. Every late winter, you chop the whole thing down to about a foot off the ground. That's it. No thinking. It comes back like a rocket. So how do you handle this without a degree? 2 ways. 1. Figure out your group, check the tag, or just watch when it blooms, because bloom timing tells you nearly everything. Or 2. The safety net. If you have no clue what you own, do nothing at all the first full year. Just watch. Note when it flowers. An unpruned clematis won't die, it'll only get a little untidy. But a clematis pruned at the wrong moment loses its whole performance. When in doubt, walk away from the shears. Now, secret number 6. This is the one I told you to wait for, and it's the reason so many clematis vanish in their first couple of years while the gardener stands there convinced the plant is impossible. Picture it. Your clematis is thriving. Climbing, green, maybe covered in buds about to pop. You walk out one morning and an entire stem, sometimes the whole plant, has collapsed. Wilted, blackened, folded over, dead-looking, in a single overnight. No warning at all. That's clematis wilt. It's a fungal thing that strikes the stems, and it is the most heartbreaking trick this plant has, because it looks exactly like the end. So here's what nearly everyone does. They decide it's gone, they dig it up, they toss it in the bin, and they go tell everyone that clematis is a waste of money. Here's the secret that changes everything. That plant is almost certainly still alive. Wilt attacks the visible top growth, but it rarely touches the root system. And if you took secret number 1 seriously and planted deep, you've got living buds sitting safely underground, completely out of the fungus's reach. So instead of giving up, you do the thing that feels crazy. You cut the entire collapsed plant right down to the ground. Remove every scrap of wilted material, get it away from the plant, and do not compost it, or you'll just spread the spores. Then you keep the soil evenly moist, keep those roots cool, and you wait. In most cases, within a few weeks, you'll see fresh green shoots pushing up from the base, clean new growth from those protected buried buds. The plant resets itself and carries on. And here's the kicker. Wilt mostly goes after the big, fancy, large-flowered hybrids. The small-flowered species types, the Viticellas, the Montanas, the Tanguticas, largely shrug it off. On top of that, most clematis that wilt do it once or twice while they're young, and then, as the root system matures and toughens up, simply stop. So the real secret was never about preventing wilt. It's about refusing to panic when it shows up. The gardener who bins the plant loses. The gardener who cuts it down and waits gets a vine that lives for 20, 30, 40 years. That one piece of knowledge is the whole line between killing clematis and being the person who can't. Secret number 7 is about staying power, the difference between a plant that survives and the monster that eats the fence. Most people either never feed their clematis, or they grab whatever dusty box is in the shed and fling a bit on whenever they happen to remember. Both leave you with a plant that just exists, alive, but never spectacular, never tough. Because clematis is a heavy feeder with a serious appetite, but it wants the right food at the right moment, not a constant fire hose of the wrong thing. Here's the mistake that hides in plain sight. Most cheap general feeds are loaded with nitrogen, and nitrogen grows leaves. Pour it on, and you get a gorgeous green wall with hardly a flower on it, a plant that looks healthy and refuses to bloom. What clematis actually wants for flowers is potassium and phosphorus. So run this rhythm. In early spring, as it wakes, work a generous double handful of compost or well-rotted manure into the soil around the base. That's your slow, steady foundation. Then, as it heads toward blooming, switch to something high in potassium. A rose feed or a tomato feed does the job beautifully, and that's what fuels the flood of flowers. Once it's blooming hard, ease off and let it ride. Container plants burn through nutrients faster, so those want a liquid potassium feed every couple of weeks through the growing season. Feed it right, and you're not just getting prettier flowers, you're filling a reserve tank in the roots that carries the plant through drought, through wilt, through a hard winter, through you forgetting it exists for a month. And secret number 8 ties a bow on all of it. Match the plant to the spot and be patient in year 1. Clematis vary wildly. Some large-flowered hybrids top out around 6 or 8 feet and suit a small trellis or a pot. Some Montanas will throw 30 feet of growth over a shed in 2 seasons and swallow anything you plant them next to. Put a monster on a dainty obelisk, and you'll fight it forever. Put a delicate hybrid on a barn wall, and it'll look lost. And here's a quiet truth the fancy catalogs won't push. The small-flowered species types are tougher, more wilt-resistant, and far more forgiving than the big, showy hybrids everyone reaches for first. If you want a plant that thrives on neglect, start there. Then, give it time. There's an old saying about Clematis that's dead accurate. First year it sleeps, second year it creeps, third year it leaps. That first season, when it looks like it's barely doing anything, it's not sulking. It's pouring everything into building roots underground. So don't panic. Don't overwater it trying to force growth. Don't dig it up in disappointment. Let it sleep. The leap is coming, and when it does, it's the fence eater. Now, what if your clematis is already a mess? What do you do today? If it's bare at the bottom with all the growth up top, cut a few of the longest stems back hard to a low pair of buds to force fresh shoots from the base, and tie the new growth out sideways. If it's yellowing, check your water first. Feel the soil 2 inches down and correct whichever way it's off. Too wet or too dry, then shade those roots. If it's all leaf and no flower, stop any nitrogen feed immediately and switch to tomato or rose food, and make sure it's actually getting 6 hours of sun up top. If something's chewing the fresh shoots to ribbons overnight, that's slugs. They love young clematis, so ring the base with wool, pellets, or grit. And if the whole thing just collapsed, you already know. Cut it to the ground, bin the debris, keep it moist, and wait for it to come back. None of these are lost causes. Almost every struggling clematis is 1 or 2 corrections away from taking off. So let's pull it together, because these 9 secrets aren't 9 separate chores, they're one strategy. Plant it deep, so it always keeps a spare underground. Cool its feet and sun its face, so it stops panicking. Water it deep and rarely, so the roots grow strong and go down. Give it something thin to climb and train it early, so it's clothed head to toe. Learn your pruning group, or leave the shears in the shed. Refuse to panic at wilt, because that plant is coming back. Feed it for flowers, not leaves. Match it to your space, and let it sleep that first year. Do those things, and you don't just get a clematis that survives, you get the one on the fence that never quits. If this changed how you see this plant, do me a favor and hit subscribe, because this whole channel is built for exactly this, the plants everyone swears are too hard, that turn out to be just misunderstood. There's a new one every week, so tap the bell so you don't miss the next one, and trust me, the next plant is going to surprise you. And drop me a line in the comments. Have you ever lost a clematis to wilt and thrown it out before you knew it could come back? Or have you got one of those unstoppable monster vines eating a fence right now? I read every single one, and your stories decide what I cover next. Now go plant something, deep, and I'll see you over the fence.